I think everybody should have a favourite statistic. And in fact, later on, when we're having drinks this evening, if you want to come up and have a chat to me, first thing I want to hear from you is what your favourite statistic is. This one's mine. According to the US National Academy of Engineering, only a small fraction of the sun's power output strikes the Earth. But even that provides 10,000 times as much as all the commercial energy that humans use on the planet today. That means in 1 hour, we receive enough energy from the sun to power the world for a whole year. Ramez Naan wrote a book recently called The Infinite Resource. He said, in less than 5 days, the sun provides as much energy as contained in all of the proven resources, all of the proven reserves of oil, coal, and natural gas on this planet. If we could capture 1/10 of 1% of the solar energy hitting the Earth, we could have access to as much as 10 times the power that we use today. Therefore, the challenge to find an abundant, low-cost, non-polluting power source is not one of science. It is simply a tech challenge. How efficiently can we harness the sun's power? How do we store it, and how do we distribute it? And there are many reasons to be optimistic that we will meet that challenge and that solar power will become our primary power source. But there's a problem that everyone in this room knows well. We're in a race against time to prevent irreversible damage to the environment from human-induced carbon emissions. Last Friday, the IPCC released their latest report, and for the first time, they set a carbon budget. To have a 2/3 chance of keeping global warming to less than 2 degrees, it said will require CO2 emissions from all anthropologic sources to stay below 1,000 trillion tonnes. Now that sounds like a lot, but by 2011, we had already used more than half of that budget, 531 trillion tonnes. Based on our current rate of emissions, we'll use up that entire budget by 2040. Carbon dioxide is already close to 400 parts per million in the atmosphere. Dr. James Hansen, a former NASA climatologist, said if humanity wishes to preserve a planet similar to that on which civilization developed and to which life on Earth is adapted, the evidence suggests CO2 will need to be reduced to 350 parts per million. And hence, we have the organisation 350.org. The United Nations Environmental Programme stated that emissions need to peak by 2020 to limit warming to less than 2 degrees centigrade. That's only 7 years away. So as long as fossil fuels remain as our primary power source, we are constantly at risk of hitting a tipping point of irreversible damage to our environment. The point is that we need a sense of urgency to galvanise people to address this challenge. Now, I'm a techno-optimist, which I hope is a growing cult, and I'm not a fan of apocalyptic forecasts. But what I'm going to do is let someone else give you an apocalyptic forecast. It's a year old. It's a video by Slate, which was based on a paper published by 22 environmental scientists.
our population growth and impact on ecosystems is driving our home planet to a tipping point and a grave future that may not include us. That's the message argued by 22 environmental experts in a new paper published in Nature this week. If not dealt with immediately, the scientists say a, quote, state shift on Earth will be inevitable, leading to sweeping biosphere changes that will include mass extinctions. The report, released ahead of the United Nations Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro later this month, says by 2025, 50% of the Earth's land will be altered by man, destroying essential natural environments needed to sustain life. And that moment, just 13 years from now, could be the beginning of the end of life as we know it. Pointing to soaring global emissions, the collapse of North Atlantic cod fisheries, and pine beetle devastation of western forests, the report says if we don't act now, we could see devastation in a matter of a few human generations. If the predictions are correct, climate change deniers might live long enough to eat their own words after all, assuming there's enough to go around.
Want more science? We've got the latest on discoveries and breakthroughs. Check out Slate News Science. Click to subscribe. Like us on Facebook at Slate Video. Follow us on Twitter at Slate Viral.
So the question I'm posing today is, can solar become our primary power source within 20 years to help address the problem? Or will it take much longer, say 50 to 100 years, or can it never be our primary power source? I'm going to use Teresa's gamification and survey the audience. So if you can take out your phones again, or your tablets or computers, and go to bit.ly/digfest. There's a question on there that I'd love you to answer, which is, will solar be our primary power source in 20 years, 50 to 100 years, or never? So I'll let you do that, and then I'll press on. Okay, if you said 50 to 100 years, then you're in the company of the US Department of Energy. They forecast it will take 37 years for solar power to generate 1/4 of our power supply. And we are off to a very slow start. I've got a quote here: "I'd put my money on the sun and solar energy. What a source of power. I hope we don't have to wait until oil and coal run out before we tackle that." Does anyone know who said this and when it was said? So Thomas Edison to Henry Ford in 1931. And here we are 80 years later, and in 2012, solar accounted for 0.4% of electricity generated globally. So how can I possibly think that solar will become our primary power source in 20 years? Well, because this guy says so. So I hope that most of you, if not all of you, know who this guy is. This is Elon Musk. He co-founded PayPal and was the largest shareholder when it was sold to eBay for $1.5 billion in 2002. Now that's pretty impressive, but what he did next is even more impressive. He went on to found 3 new companies, each of which is valued in the billions of dollars today. And he did that before the age of 40. The 3 businesses are SpaceX, which provided the first commercial space flight for NASA on NASA's behalf; Solar City, which is the largest provider of solar power systems in the US; and Tesla, the electric car company. Solar will generate more power than any other energy source within 20 years. He said this at a TED talk earlier this year. Now, just because a successful entrepreneur says it, that doesn't mean it's going to happen, although Musk is clearly making his contribution. The key argument that I'm going to make in favour of Musk's forecasts is that we are currently living in an era of exponentially accelerating innovation. An idea proposed in this book, Abundance, which I'd encourage you all to read, it predicts very significant social change over the course of the next 20 years. Now, think about what's changed in the last 20 years. The very first human-to-human text message, SMS, was sent 20 years ago, 1993. Mobile phones were still clunky bricks. Smartphones didn't exist. The use of the internet was very limited. In fact, it was basically non-existent for most people. Today, there are nearly 7 billion mobile phones, a global penetration rate of 96%. Gartner predicts that 1 billion smartphones will be sold this year. And the number of internet users is approaching 3 billion. Imagine the impact of 3 billion people connected for the first time in history, able to share ideas, share research, innovations, share their networks. This has brought in the era of exponentially accelerating innovation. And the evidence suggests that solar is going to be a major beneficiary of this, is already a major beneficiary of this. So I'm sure most of you know Moore's law. This was the observation by Gordon Moore, the co-founder of Intel, in 1965. That computing power would double every 2 years for the same dollar cost. I.e., there's been exponential growth in computing power for the past 50 years. There's a similar observation called Wright's law that observes an exponential relationship between cumulative installed capacity and price declines. Well, we can see both Moore's law and Wright's law operating for solar energy. This is the decline in the price of photovoltaic modules, PV modules, since 1980. And what you can see that's very important about this graph is that it's on a log scale. So a straight declining line on a log scale means that we have an exponential decline in the price of PV modules for the past 30 years. Basically, the relationship is the prices fall 50% every 5 years. What you can see, though, is that the price decline has actually accelerated in the last 5 years. This is essentially the same thing. It's the decline in prices from a report that Citigroup put out. And their argument is that this faster pace of decline, which started in 2008, is going to continue, and that module prices will fall to just 25 cents per watt by 2020. GTM Research forecast that Chinese manufacturers will achieve 36 cents per watt by 2017, and their view is that their forecast is conservative. The result is that there has been exponential growth in solar installations. This is a graph of cumulative installed PV from 2003, and again, it's a log scale. So straight rising line means the increase is exponential. Capacity has been doubling every 2 years. Although over the last 5 years, the pace has accelerated and we've seen a 10-fold increase in 5 years. The EPIA, the European Photovoltaic Industry Association, forecast an increase from 100 gigawatts to over 400 gigawatts over the next 5 years, but their forecast may actually turn out to be conservative. This is a breakdown of electricity generation in Germany. And if you look at this last chart here on your right, this shows that already on a sunny weekend in Germany, solar power generates 80% of their electricity. Now, this picture also raises the key issue, which is often highlighted by the skeptics of renewable energy and by the vested interests of fossil fuels, which is that, of course, solar is an intermittent power source. The sun doesn't always shine, and while we live in a country of high solar intensity, I grew up in a country which had an excess supply of clouds. Which brings us back to innovation and technology. These are images from the websites of SolarCity and Tesla. On the side of the building, the B, on the side of the building image there, is a battery pack. And obviously, and as we heard from the previous speaker, the critical element of electric vehicles is the battery. Now, Elon Musk, who set up both of these companies, has already said that Tesla and SolarCity are cooperating on battery technology development. And in California, they already have rolled out battery packs with their residential solar power systems, and the plan is to roll that out nationally in the US next year. And we appear to be on the cusp of major breakthroughs in battery technology, with the next generation of lithium batteries under development, such as lithium air and lithium sulfur. In May of this year, the University of Illinois announced a breakthrough on lithium-ion batteries, which involves miniaturization of existing components to build a super battery with 30 times the power of existing batteries and 1,000 times faster charging. They claim this could be on the market within 2 years. So just imagine what happens to the utilization of solar capacity when battery technology advances to the point where a battery could be charged in less than 1 hour and provide power for days, weeks, maybe even months. That battery could be shipped to anywhere in the world to meet the energy needs of low solar intensity countries. Electric vehicles would become ubiquitous, and even planes, boats could be powered by solar energy. At that point, we'll have an abundant, low-cost, non-polluting energy. And importantly, there'll be a massive energy dividend. The reduced cost of generating power benefits everyone. Well, maybe not quite everyone. Maybe there's a few large corporations that would suffer, but the biggest benefit will flow to the poorest, who have little or no access to reliable energy, reliable electricity sources, or who spend a substantial portion of their income on generating power. So can it be achieved in 20 years? Well, here's the path. Once again, log scale, percentage of solar energy, solar as a percentage of total power. The assumptions that go into here are the forecast from EPIA out to 2017, and then a slower growth rate for installations, 16% per annum to 2033, and a 1 percentage point increase in output to a total of around 30% by 2033. I've also assumed that power consumption increases at the same rate that it has for the last 20 years. With those assumptions, by 2033, solar will be our primary power source. My key message is that this is within our grasp. This can happen over the next 20 years, thanks to the era of exponential innovation. However, we mustn't be complacent. We must all play our part to make this happen, as there are vested interests lined up against this rate of progress, and there is substantial inertia amongst many people, not least of all our politicians. So what can we all do? Well, the obvious one is go and install some solar. In Australia, we're already at 1 million rooftops with solar panels. Let's get it to 2 million. Let's lobby the government. In Peru, if Peru can design a policy that delivers both social welfare and increased usage of solar, then surely Australia can design policies to accelerate the development of the solar industry. Buy an electric vehicle. The Model S, the Tesla Model S, was rated Best Car of the Year for 2013. Not Best Electric Vehicle, but Best Car of the Year for 2013. And support solar and battery innovation. There's a project on RMIT, CSIRO, IRO together on a nanotech project to print solar cells. We're about to hear a fabulous innovation of solar paint. And donate. There's a solar charity. It's a crowdfunding charity. It's called sunfunder.com. There are 1.4 billion people today living without electricity. And what Sunfunder does, it's a crowdsourcing site, funds solar power to the poorest communities in the world. And lastly, spread the word. People need to know that this is achievable. Once they hear that there's a realistic solution to human-induced climate change that's within our grasp, people will be motivated to contribute more to achieving this solution. I'll give the last word to Al Gore. We have a planetary emergency. We need to find a sense of generational mission. We have the capacity to solve this problem. We need to set aside the culture of distraction. We are the generation about which future generations will celebrate that we were the ones to solve this crisis. Thank you very much.